Women in the United States have been fighting for their right to vote since before 1848 at the Seneca Falls Convention, where they showed strength and persistence. They led protests, petitions, and marches to Congress that all led up to the 19th Amendment. On July 19th, 1848, the first women's rights meeting is held in Seneca Falls, New York. The members of the meeting signed the Declaration of Sentiments, which is consisted of 12 resolutions that called for equal treatment. The document faced significant backlash and criticism at the time, with many withdrawing their signatures due to the controversy surrounding the document's radical demands for women's rights. Today, it is considered to be a successful document. Then, in 1849, the first National Women's Rights Convention takes place in Worcester, Massachusetts. This attracts more than 1,000 participants. 1 year later, at a women's rights convention in Akron, Ohio, Sojourner Truth, a former slave, delivers her now memorable speech, Ain't I a Woman? Then, 10 years after that, in 1860, the Civil War begins in the United States, and women's right advocacy completely stops until the war ends in 1865. The same year the war ends, Elizabeth C. Stanton and Susie B. Anthony formed the American Equal Rights Association, an organization for black and white women and men dedicated to the goal of universal suffrage. They petitioned Congress for universal suffrage. This is the first time that Congress really hears about women's suffrage, and it was a new concept, and they had a long way to go. On July 28, 1868, the 14th Amendment was ratified. This amendment declared that all individuals born in the U.S., including former slaves, are to be guaranteed equal protection under the law. This document didn't even come close to solving men being treated better than women. The 15th Amendment was passed by Congress on February 26, 1869, prohibiting the Constitution to deny citizens the right to vote based on their race. This still didn't allow women to vote, only men of any race. This is proven by the fact that in 1872, Susan B. Anthony was arrested for voting in the presidential election. Then, for the first time in 1878, the Women's Suffrage Amendment is made known to Congress. In 1890, the National American Women's Suffrage Association is formed and begins implementing statewide campaigns to gain more support. This association helped women regain hope and start to think that they might be able to vote one day. 3 years later, Colorado becomes the first state to grant women the right to vote. This is a huge deal all over the United States. In 1896, the National Association for Colored Women is created. This illustrated that women of all colors need to be treated the same no matter what. 1913 rolls around, and the Congressional Union for Women's Suffrage is formed by Alice Paul and Lucy Burns. This is later renamed the National Women's Party. The National Women's Party in 1916 began demonstrations, picketing, and parades to show their disapproval of President Wilson's lack of support of the suffrage amendment. Without the president's support, women's suffrage could not get any better. On May 21, 1919, the Women's Suffrage Amendment was passed by both the House of Representatives and the Senate. The states still needed to ratify the amendment, but this was a step in the right direction for all women. Then, in 1920, the 19th Amendment was signed into the Constitution, and women were granted the right to vote across the United States. The National American Women Suffrage Association disbands, feeling accomplished and ready to vote for the first time. Women today wouldn't be able to vote if this had not have happened. Apart from the right to vote, women sought to be elected for office and shape public policies. For example, Minnie Fisher Cunningham ran for the U.S. Senate in Texas in 1927. She lost, but later went to work for President Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal. Later, in 1940, Jim Crow laws came, and things like literacy tests and poll taxes were meant to keep African Americans, men and women, from voting. In 1952, the race restrictions of the 1790 Naturalization Law are repealed by the McCarran-Walter Act, giving first-generation Japanese Americans, including women, citizenship and voting rights. After that, in 1965, more than 500 peaceful protesters participated in the Selma to Montgomery March for voting rights. During this 54-mile route, which took them 3 days from Selma to the state capital of Montgomery, they were confronted with deadly violence from both local authorities and groups of white people who disagreed with them. John Lewis, Rosa Parks, and Martin Luther King Jr. all participated. Then, in 1966, the National Organization for Women, NOW, was established on June 30th in Washington, D.C. Among NOW's 28 founders was its first president, Betty Friedan. In 1982, President Ronald Reagan signed a 25-year extension of the Voting Rights Act. Having the president support this was a huge deal for all women. Later in 1990, due to the enforcement of the Voting Rights Act, the number of African American elected officials in Georgia grew to 495 from just only the 3 before that. Over 10 years later, in 2006, Congress extended Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act for an additional 25 years. Groups like the National Organization for Women and the Association for Women's Rights in Development are still fighting for women to keep their right to vote. Today, I can look back and see that my mother and grandmother would not have been able to vote in the 2024 presidential election if it weren't for all the women before us.